All right, introducing another first for Mopar. Plug and play, 1,000 horsepower, Mopar 426 supercharged Hellephant crate Hemi engine.
Late, but I'm going to start tearing down this Hellephant engine. So I might break this up into a couple different things. You won't know because Brody will edit it to make it look like it's seamless, but we're gonna get started. So I'm just gonna start taking this thing apart. This is a Hellephant engine, same basic principle as all the other Hellcat engines or all the Gen 3 Hemi engines. So if you got any one of these engines, this is going to apply. So I'll try to highlight any differences that the Hellephant has and the things that it doesn't, in case y'all are wondering. And so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, first things first, I'm gonna go ahead and I think I've got most of the tools that I need laid out here. That way I'm not going to my toolbox 50 times. I've already got a video about a supercharger teardown video. So he can probably link that in the description. So if you're wondering about taking the actual supercharger apart, this is the 3-liter Hellephant supercharger. It's same basic thing as the 2.4 that's on the Hellcat and the Trackhawk and the 2.7 that's on the Demon and the Red Eye. So you can watch that video and you'll know how to tear it down. Okay, so if you're not sure how the belt is routed on any car, used to all the cars had like a belt routing diagram underneath the hood, made it real easy. Now you don't see that so much nowadays. So if you're not sure, just get you a notepad, piece of paper, pen, and just kind of write out a rough diagram of the pulley configuration and just write the belt routing down. I'm a horrible artist and even I can maintain that, even I can manage that. Obviously I know how these go together, come apart, so I don't need to do that. You can see something that's pretty interesting on the Hellephant. I'm just going to point it out right now before we even get started. When we started developing these packages, one of the first few things that we did were a lower temperature thermostat, a different heat range, a different style spark plug, obviously tuning, and our stage 2 package integrated a different crank dampener, which is this right here. And it is actually the same exact one that they used on the Hellephant engine. This is a 10% overdrive dampener pulley made by ATI. So this is the same one we've been using since 2015. On all the other platforms, what we have to do is we have to machine the timing cover right here to allow for the bigger pulley. So the Hellephant engine has a different timing cover that already has this section machined out. They've also pinned the crankshaft on this, which is something we've been doing since 2015. It was a known weak point on these engines. They did this to resolve that issue, I'm sure. Other than that, pretty much the same. They did change the bolt location here. There is one bolt that we need to machine down for the pulley to fit on the regular cars, where they kind of just changed or omitted a bolt. Other than that, I'll get into taking this off later, but just to highlight that they've kind of included this on the Hellephant engine. If you want more boost out of an engine, you've got a supercharger this style, or actually centrifugal, same thing. You got two options. You can go bigger on the crank pulley and you can go smaller on the supercharger pulley. I personally think it's a better idea to always go bigger on the crankshaft as opposed to smaller on the supercharger first. A lot of times you will get a little bit more labor intensive work down here, but this gives you the opportunity to put a better balancer on the engine, and they call this a crank dampener or a balancer because on most engines this is responsible for the internal balancing of the engine. So if you can improve this, that will lead to engine longevity, better bearing life, less bearing wear, so on and so forth. And what this does is for every revolution of the engine, as you increase this diameter, this is moving the belt more. So this is turning the supercharger more and faster. So this will create more boost. The main advantage to this is you are gaining pulley to belt surface area, okay? So as you increase the boost, the resistance on this belt becomes more because the supercharger is trying to resist turning. So this is where you get into belt slip issues. So if you can increase this pulley diameter, what you have is you have more pulley to belt surface area. So you're gonna have less slip. Just to highlight this, say you took this thing, you put this thing down to like the size of little bitty, like stupid small. you would have a very small surface area where the belt is actually contacting the pulley. Therefore, when you increase resistance, it would be easier for the belt to slip across the pulley, okay? So this is why we always do, this is stage 2. There's some products on the market that don't replace this and have some other alternatives. I'm personally not a fan of that. It's just personal preference. I'm not saying that's bad for everybody. Just if you ask my opinion, I would say put a quality pulley on the bottom, a damper, and go that route. So they've done this on the Hellephant engine. So that's about all for here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna lay this stuff out on this table. This is really not important. I'm just trying to keep it neat. And Brody's done such a good job of making this set. You see this Lamborghini box on here? No, I just didn't put it on here to be cool and have a Lamborghini box or some stupid shit. I've got a purpose for this. I'm gonna show y'all here in a little bit. So take the belt off. I'm not gonna get into disassembling the supercharger. On this particular build, we've got something kind of special that we're gonna do. I'm not gonna get into it yet. I'm gonna tell you all when we're actually building it. So as I take this apart, I'm gonna kind of tell you all what we have planned for this because it's pretty damn cool. And then we can kind of get into specifics later on. Belt is off. This is just like it'd be in a car. We don't need to do a whole lot of disassembly here as far as just to remove the supercharger and not take it apart. And again, Brody can link the supercharger teardown video in the description. And I feel like I went into pretty good detail on how to disassemble this thing. It's not terribly hard, especially if you're mechanically inclined. If you're not, you might not want to try that. I don't know. You know, we're not getting into specifics as far as like taking the rotor pack apart. That I would definitely not do unless you are very proficient at this and mechanically inclined, because you can really do a lot of damage super quickly. I would send that to a person that specializes in superchargers. You know, there's several out there. You know, Brett and Jokers. You know, he does a good job. But anybody like that you're comfortable with, there's several people out there. You know, I'm not saying this person's best and this person sucks. You know, it's not going to get into all that. But so all I'm doing right now, you probably don't have a super good shot of this, is there are 10 bolts that hold the supercharger to the cylinder heads. So I will remove these. You can see that I broke these loose by hand. I prefer to do that. An impact like this impacts the bolts. It just, I don't know. Been doing this a long time, so I'm just kind of set my ways. So don't pay, you know, if I feel like I'm doing something that's crucial based off years of experience, I'll mention it, but everybody's got their own way. A lot of times I speak confidently, but that does not mean that I am always right. I'm always wrong, so keep that in mind. So these are the bolts that actually hold the supercharger to the engine. They have 10 millimeter, you'll use a 10 millimeter socket. These look to be around an 8 millimeter bolt. So all the other Torx head bolts, those actually take the supercharger, the lid off, and I go over that in the other video. So for this, we don't need to do that. Because we're not going to get into this teardown video. On this particular build, we are not going to use a stock supercharger. So I can't really get into exactly what we're going to do. But I will touch base on this Hellephant supercharger. Just what it is, how it's similar, how it's different. I will go ahead and touch base on that since we're here. So other than that, we've got... So I took the bolts loose. And then we have this Pcv line right here. And again, this is another thing that I've touched base on the catch can video. So I'm not going to go into detail of this. We got other videos, but basically this is taking the crankcase gases, the dirty side, and venting them from this valve cover into the supercharger to be reburned. And this is where it gets into the discussion of a catch can, crankcase breather system, and all that. This is not the video for that, but this is the line that takes these gases and everything else and puts them back into the engine. So I'm just taking this off because it is connected. We need to take it off. So put this here and I'll organize this shit later. As far as on the back, we do not need to remove the fuel rails because they are completely contained in the supercharger. We don't need to take the lid off. All that will come off with everything. There's no wiring on this engine, obviously, so we don't need to contend with that. So that's basically everything that holds the supercharger to the engine. Now, if this was in the car, these Demon Red Eye platforms, they use a 1/2-inch fuel line disconnect, which is very uncommon. I had to have something made. So I'm not aware of a kit that's on the market, whether it be off a tool truck or anything else, that releases the fuel line. So a lot of times it's a pain in the fucking ass. Let me rephrase it. It's a pain in the ass. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll just take the rail loose from the supercharger and leave it hooked to the rail in the car. That's typically easier if you don't have the right tool for it. And then other than that, I know this is probably looks like this is making it look super easy, like one of those Saturday morning TV shows where they build a car in 30 minutes. But with the engine off the car and with there no wiring or anything like that, it is much, much easier than in a car. I didn't plan it or stage it like that, but it is what it is. So all I'm doing is just separating the supercharger from the cylinder heads. Now again, this is a brand new engine. It's never been run. It's out of the crate. So this is not a realistic version of what this looks like. Once the car's been ran and been through some heat cycles, you're going to have to separate this a little bit more carefully. Chances are it could possibly tear the gasket up, so you want to be careful. But you know, in this instance, this is the Saturday morning past the cartoon section of this removal. Now normally I would get somebody to help me remove this, but John is passed the fuck out right now, so I'm here solo taking this off. So I'm gonna get this nice and loose. Maybe I can steal Brody, who's sitting there in a folding chair behind the camera for this whole thing. I'll try to take this off, and if this is a failure, Brody will edit it out because he loves me. Yeah. We're just gonna pick it up and put it on the table. All right, so this thing's about 80 pounds. I don't want to fuck it up on camera and look like a dumbass. I'm do good enough of making myself look like an idiot to begin with. So Brody is going to assist me. So two people make it way easier. Right. So we'll put it right here on the table. Okay, so I'm not going to get any crazy detail on the supercharger. We're not even going to disassemble it. Reason being is because there's really no need to. So this is a 3-liter supercharger. All these superchargers, whether it be the 2.4 off the Hellcat or the Trackhawk, the 2.7-liter off the Demon or Red Eye, or this 3-liter off the Hellephant engine, all these are made by IHI, which is actually IHI Turbo America. So they're out of Illinois. IHI makes all the superchargers for all the AMG cars and so on and so forth. So now it's like Daimler, Chrysler, they're all kind of tied into one. Really good supercharger, especially for a stock vehicle. So this is the 3-liter version. It is really not all that different, okay? The lid is exactly the same, okay? So the lid is the exact same on all the superchargers, which means the case is the exact same size. So where they're getting the extra displacement is the rotor pack that's inside here. They are extending it, and then they're changing the profile of the lobes to scoop more air. That's it. The intercooler bricks, the case, the lid, the bypass valve, everything else is identical, okay? This will make more power, okay, but keep in mind that the longer they make the rotor pack, this is just like a drive shaft that gets longer and longer, okay? The amount of run out in the drive shaft as it gets longer, the most minuscule amount can get exponential, okay? So in my opinion, you need to be careful when overspinning the supercharger because it's really not fundamentally stronger than the other ones, okay? So you can probably get into trouble more easily on this than the other ones, just for the simple fact that the rotor pack is longer, okay? Now, I don't have an extensive amount of knowledge or experience on these Hellephant superchargers, so take this with a grain of salt. This is just a fundamental idea or engineering principle, okay? As far as differences, the rotor pack's longer, we talked about that. The lid looks different, it's the same damn thing, they just made it black. Same fuel rail as the Red Eye and Demon. Injectors, I'm not going to act like I know everything in the world that I'm talking about. I don't know if they're exactly the same. The main thing that I do notice that's different that I was going to point out to you all is, and I did this on the unboxing video as well, so the supercharger snout. So this front piece right here that bolts in right here. This is the main component that benefits from porting, polishing, a pulley change, changing the hub out, upgrading various things, drive pins where it connects into the rotor pack, so on and so forth. So what we've been doing since 2015 is porting and polishing this so it lets more air into the engine more efficiently. So what Dodge has done on this Hellephant engine is they have actually come up with a new casting. Okay, so it would not be cost effective for an auto manufacturer to port and polish an engine component. It just wouldn't. It would be absolutely stupid. So what they're going to do is they're just going to make a new casting that opens up the area to simulate porting and polishing, which is exactly what they've done. So they've kind of carried over a lot of this stuff that we figured out a long time ago. Now, it is not that Dodge doesn't know anything that we do. Dodge is much, much smarter than we are. Okay, they have very good engineers and multi-million-dollar testing facilities and all that. They have a strategic process about what cars they release with what horsepower versus the other manufacturers, so on and so forth. They have regulations that we don't have to abide by. So again, take this with a grain of salt. If there's an independent shop owner that has a performance shop and they are acting like the engineers are stupid or don't know what they're talking about, chances are they're actually one that's stupid, okay? So this just goes to show you that they knew exactly the entire time what to do to add more power, and this is what they did. They didn't copy us, they didn't copy anybody else. They knew exactly what to do. So that's it. The throttle body is the stock Red Eye Demon throttle body, same part number, bypass valve, so on and so forth. Now the pulley, they did decide to use a Hellraiser pulley, which is pretty cool. If I was Hellraiser, I'd be pretty pumped about that. Gives their company a lot of clout. We do our own custom pulleys here, okay? So there's nothing wrong with the Hellraiser pulley. They use the clutch hub. We go a little bit different route. It's just the way that I think is better. Again, it's just my opinion. So, I'm not sitting here arguing with anybody. Just take it with a grain of salt. But I'm just pointing out the differences. So that's that. So as far as this supercharger goes, we're just going to leave it as is. I'll let Brody change the camera angle because that's really all I have to say about this. Good supercharger. So let's get on to the engine. What I want to do now is talk about this right here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the cylinder heads off. Okay, so before we even do this, if you've got a Hellcat based engine, I'm going to move this a little bit. One thing that I have noticed that we've seen recently are these supercharger belt tensioners right here. The springs are getting weak. We're seeing the cars fall on their face where the belt slips across this. So real quick remedy, I'm going to show you all a little trick that we come up with. So if you got an accurate torque wrench, which I'm a huge Snap-on fan. You will see like electric tools. I love Milwaukee, like absolutely love them. I'm not saying they're better than Snap-on. I just think they're as good. I like them, I don't know. But everything else, I basically use Snap-on. If you want to say I'm tool snob, I don't give a shit. So, supercharger belt tensioner, okay, torque wrench. Real quick, there's a spring in here, okay? So if you are wondering, how do I tell if this tensioner is weak, so on and so forth, just put a torque wrench on it, set the value to something really high, and just simple as that. Move the tensioner and see what you got. So I've got 24.8 foot-pounds. So this is pretty good. And you can see where you position the torque wrench. I went a little bit higher this time. We've got 26.6. So if you're wondering, hey, where do I put the damn torque wrench? It's simple. If you look at this tensioner, you can see that there's kind of a parallel line right here. So the most accurate version is going to basically position that torque wrench straight up in line. In the car, you might have a little bit of clearance issue. But move the torque wrench. You got 29.4. You got 33.1. So there's a coil spring in here. As you move the tensioner, it is going to get tighter. Okay, so the main issue is where you have your belt size, where this tensioner starts getting hard. So if you're cruising along and you're doing like a driving Miss Daisy stage and you're in 5th gear and you stomp on it because somebody pulls up next to you, you downshift into 3rd and hold on, goddamn air compressor. Brody's gonna edit this out because the air compressor's going. So I'm gonna take a drink of this nice refreshing Bang during my break. What is Radical Skedaddle? Rainbow Unicorn. The cans look almost the same. and very easily move the tensioner until you get to the stop, but don't push against the stop. There we go. See what your torque wrench reads, 34.4. Okay, so this is telling you the spring tension in the tensioner. This is a brand new tensioner. This is good. So if you have one that reads 18 or 19, the belt is going to slip. Buy a damn tensioner and be done with it. So there you go. First thing we're going to do, remove the ignition coils. This is obviously much, much easier with the engine out of the car. It can be a little bit pain in the ass with the engine in the car, but same principle. What I do is, if it's in the car, on this side, I move the coolant tank, move it out of the way. There's a wiring harness that's very close. It's on the strut tower. What I find is easiest is to pry it loose from the body of the car, disconnect it, and kind of pull it up over top the negative jump start battery terminal. It will reach, and that will give you a lot of clearance. So that's just a kind of a trick. The other side is much more accessible. So all the ignition coils are 10 millimeter socket. And you see, again, I'm not a crazy proponent of impacts or air ratchets or anything like that. I like to do the final, like the first loosening and the final torquing by hand. That is what I would suggest. I see a lot of younger guys getting a whole lot of trouble, getting too dependent on air ratchets, and now basically, like, there's not really many air ratchets now. So if this was a regular car that came in, okay, and what I would do is I would make damn sure to keep every single thing separated. So every ignition coil would be separated for the cylinder that it came off of, every spark plug, everything individual to the cylinder. So once you get into this, you might not know that there's a problem with something. Once you get into it, you might find something like, oh shit, I didn't know this. It's going to be much more beneficial to know what cylinder this potential problem came from, so you know what to look or what to focus on later on. So this is a brand new engine. I'm not doing this now. This is not the example that I was set. So if you came here and I was going to teach you, I would make sure that you, hey, don't just take all this shit and throw it in a pile. You might want to know later on what cylinder this came out of. So keep that in mind. An older guy that was much smarter than me years ago taught me that, and I do it to this day, and I would suggest doing that. Ignition coils, we do get some questions. Hey, should I put aftermarket ignition coils on? Should I put these MSD ignition coils on? I have nothing against MSD. My answer would be no. They're not going to do a damn thing. The stock ignition coils are probably going to be better than any aftermarket shit you put on there. So save your money. That's all marketing fucking bullshit hype. And if you want to waste your money on them, go ahead. But I wouldn't screw with them. The stock ignition coils are perfectly adequate. Again, I'm going to go back. I'm going to say this several times during this video. The engineers at these auto manufacturers are extremely intelligent. They have obviously the funding to hire whoever they want to. They have multi-million-dollar test facilities. They're going to have more money than any of these aftermarket companies. Okay, so they're not going to put a part on a car that is going to be subpar and cause them warranty issue money or anything else. So, you know, don't just automatically assume that the stuff that's on their stock needs to be upgraded. A lot of times it does not. So if you start reading the forums or magazines that are conducive to selling parts, you might be tempted to start replacing everything under the sun, and what that usually ends up with is a lot of problems. So don't do that to yourself. So the ignition coils that they use, they are very good. I don't think that as of now I've ever seen a failure from one. So, you know, good quality. So what you're seeing me doing is just running the screws back in. They'll kind of contain themselves in here so you don't lose them or lose track. On all the Hemi engines, there's 2 spark plugs per cylinder. Hemi's done that for a long time. I'm not going to get into fundamentals and theory and logic and all that. We're just going to say that all the Hemi engines have 2 spark plugs per cylinder. So you're going to put spark plugs in them. You're going to buy 16 for an 8-cylinder. So if you think that's weird, it probably is. If you're not used to a Hemi engine, you're not going to think it's weird at all. But if you're like a Ford guy or a GM guy, it's going to be a little bit different. So again, when this is in the car, there's going to be some obstructions that you need to, you're going to have to kind of take into account. But again, same basic thing. And so you can see that what I've done already is orientate these cylinder or ignition coils not properly. Because I'm talking on camera running my mouth, I'm not paying attention, which I usually don't do. So I'm going to fix that issue. So coils are out. What do we got next? We got spark plugs. So let's remove those. So I've already got my... So I'm probably going to have to go over to my toolbox here. Yeah, I can make this work. So I've got a spark plug socket. You don't have to have this. It makes it much easier. If you don't have one, use a regular socket. It's 5/8, and then you can put like a magnet on a stick and go down in there and get the spark plug out. I'm not going to get into crazy detail on heat ranges and all that other shit. As far as putting spark plugs in a car, they're going to have a torque spec on them, and I would suggest that you follow that torque spec. We see cars come in all the time because people do not torque the spark plugs properly. They tend to over tighten them or under tighten them. They either come in and they're loose or they're so damn tight it's cracked the porcelain. You're not going to be able to see it. It's going to be internal. It's going to be a part of the spark plug you can't see. So generally on a spark plug like this, you're going to be somewhere around 18 foot-pounds. I don't know what the hell that is, Newton meters, without converting it, which I'm not going to do on this video. But you can put it in your phone and Google or something shit and find it. There's a specific reason why they do that. Like I said, it's mainly because you can damage the porcelain in an area you cannot see. So, so if you got a good spark plug socket, I can tell by the very fine point that these are iridium. And not only that, if I was illiterate, I would see that it says iridium. So, big surprise. So, iridium plug is going to be easily recognizable, so I actually picked it out with the tip on the electrode before I even read the word iridium, just because that's what I saw first. So we're going to go back with something different. I'm not going to get into spark plug theory and logic and all that, but and again, I'm not worried about keeping these separated because the engine has never been fired yet. If this was any other scenario, okay, I would definitely keep these separated. Exactly what spark plug came out of what cylinder, what hole, the whole 9 yards. If you look at my hand, NSCs look like the Tin Man. That's another thing I want to highlight. I always recommend putting a conservative amount of NSCs on the threads, okay? You're screwing a spark plug into an aluminum cylinder head. You want to get it tight. You don't want it to loosen up. You want it to be properly torqued. But what you do not want to do is have the threads gall or seize in the cylinder heads because you could potentially have a huge problem later on down the road. So I would use NSCs. What I would not do is make sure that you do not get the NSCs close to the electrode because you're going to have a huge problem on your hands. You're going to be putting new plugs in it right away. So NSCs on the threads. Torque them properly. Another huge mistake I see is people, what is it? there seems to be this theory nowadays that like gapping a spark plug or checking the gap on a spark plug is somehow not important anymore. The gap on a spark plug literally dictates the strength of the spark, the length of the spark. There's a lot of stuff going on inside there. Without going into crazy detail, the spark plug gap is incredibly important. Now, a lot of spark plugs nowadays, they will come pre-gapped iridium because the point's so fine. It still does not hurt to check. You don't know what happened to that spark plug. You don't know if it's, not gapped correctly. Even if it's like a non-gappable spark plug, it literally, you can buy a gapper tool for 99 cents at AutoZone or whatever bullshit car parts store you want to go to. Just check the damn gap. Like it'll take you 2 seconds and it'll save you a shit ton of headache later on down the road. So spark plugs are out. Again, one more time. If this was any other scenario, you would want to keep these separated per cylinder. If the car had been ran at all, 500 miles, 250 miles, 10,000 miles, I don't give a shit. Keep them separated. If you have a problem, it's so much easier to figure out what the problem is. If you don't know how to read spark plugs, it's much easier to find somebody that does, and if they can see what spark plugs came out of what cylinder, they're going to be able to help you immensely. You can email us pictures. We'd be happy to help you. But if I don't know what cylinder that spark plug came out of, I cannot do anything to help you at all. So moving on. I'm going to pull the valve covers off. I mentioned briefly earlier as far as PCV, dirty side, clean side. I'm not going to get into all that. Driver side's clean side. Passenger side's dirty side. Is that general rule for every engine? No. If you want to know what side the clean side is, the easiest, where is the air filter? Okay, if the air filter's over here and the intake tube's coming in here, and you've got a line going from after the air filter going to this valve cover or anything else, that is going to be your clean side because obviously the air filter's over there. This side is going to be evacuating to the engine, somewhere to the supercharger or the intake manifold, depending on what type of engine you have. So this right here is the Pcv valve. Okay, so there's a spring, there's some valving in here. I'm in the process of developing an entirely new crankcase ventilation system with an adjustable PCV system. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that, but it's going to incorporate a piece of this. So if you're wondering, hey, my car doesn't have a PCV valve, and I'll see it. Yes, it does. It's right there. It's kind of integrated in with, there's internal baffling in the valve cover. Which is all this shit right here. And baffling, I mean, that is to let the air out from the crankcase while trapping engine oil. And, the Hellcat engine actually does a really good job of ventilating the crankcase. The PCV system's pretty good. Some cars, like newer Corvettes, they do a very poor job at it. So I give Dodge credit there for doing a really good job. Like we won't even do any forced induction on any GM LT platform without doing a dedicated crankcase breather system because you will blow the front and rear seal out of the engine. The flow is horrible. Hellcat, you can get away with 1,000 horsepower if you wanted to. I'm not suggesting it, but you can definitely get away with it without having to do something. But, again, this wouldn't be the best suggestion. We are getting closer to the need for that Lamborghini box, I'll tell you. I don't want to spoil the surprise for you all. So valve cover, what we got here. As you can see, you got the valve cover gasket. You've got the spark plug tube seals. This is the same on any modern car. If you got like a coil-on plug, you're going to have either a single or a dual seal right here. If you need to do spark plugs in a car, you pull the ignition coil out, then there's a shit ton of oil in the hole. This is the seal that's leaking. Take the valve cover off, replace the seal, or you're gonna fuck the ignition coil up. This is the baffling system, okay? You'll see this port right here. What this is there's oil underneath here, okay? It has to lubricate the rocker arms, the top of the push rods, And what we don't want is air coming out of the crankcase through this hole and engine oil coming out of here and getting into the engine. So this is the baffling system. That's this kind of tall thing that they've incorporated on all the Hellcat engines. Really efficient for a stock car. So that's what that is. I'm gonna put this over here and pull the other side off. We can see this engine is quickly dwindling in size. .426 Mopar caution. Before starting, fill the engine with Pennzoil 10W60 synthetic oil. Prime the engine or engine will be permanently damaged. 1060, that's probably nothing you're used to hearing. There are some European cars we'll use 1060 on. This engine is not regulated by any EPA standards or emissions because it's meant for a pre-1972 vehicle. Okay, so this is not in a production vehicle. So engine oil actually plays a lot to do with emissions and what's acceptable and so on and so forth. So they're telling you to run 1060 oil in this. They have built this engine with specs that they want the 1060 oil. Does this mean you should use 1060 in your Hellcat? No. Use whatever in the hell they tell you to use. Do not read in the forums and Joe Blow says he uses 1540 Rotella diesel oil. Forget what Joe Blow says. Just use whatever in the hell the manufacturer says unless there is a known problem. So 1060 Pennzoil. I personally think Pennzoil Platinum is a very good oil. It's factory fill on Ferrari and so on and so forth. Now keep in mind, that is because they have a contract with Pennzoil. Okay, it's not because it's the best oil in the world. So we use Amsoil and everything. Now Amsoil does not make a 1060 at this current time. So we will probably use Pennzoil 1060 in this engine. Unless Amsoil comes out with a 1060 that they think is acceptable and they said it's rated for this engine. So keep that in mind. I will not use Amsoil and completely go against the manufacturer's specification. As far as manufacturer, Dodge did not make this engine. Big surprise. I don't know if Dodge actually wants you all to know who made the engine. So I don't know if I'm at liberty to say it, so I don't want to open my big damn mouth. But Dodge did not make the engine. A extremely talented, reputable race team made all these engines, okay? So I'm not gonna even say who it is because I don't know if I'm allowed to, but that's a good thing, okay? So it's much higher precision than anybody at Dodge or what it would have been capable of. That's why they did that.